In a quiet suburb of Illinois, far from the ancient stones of Rome and the thrones of power, lived a couple whose simple, faithful life became the soil from which something extraordinary would grow. Mildred Agnes Provost and her husband Louis never sought recognition. They didn't build monuments or lead global causes. What they built was something far more powerful, a home rooted in faith, love, and quiet consistency. Mildred, a woman of unwavering devotion, lived her faith not through grand gestures but through the daily rhythm of grace. She didn't write books or deliver speeches. Instead, she knelt at the bedside of her children, whispering prayers that echoed through the hearts of her family. Her faith was gentle, humble, and steadfast. Louis, her steady partner, led with quiet strength. His life was defined by honesty, humility, and a deep respect for the sacredness of family. Together, they created a home where faith wasn't spoken about loudly. It was lived quietly and powerfully in every moment. From this humble environment came their son, Robert, affectionately known as Rob. He grew up in the gentle rhythms of suburban life, neighborhood laughter, Sunday dinners, bedtime prayers. But even in this simplicity, something sacred was beginning to take shape. At St. Mary of the Assumption Parish in Riverdale, Rob discovered more than religious routine. He found meaning. He sang in the choir, served at the altar, and absorbed the beauty of the liturgy. As a young child, he was already drawn toward the sacred. While others imagined themselves as athletes or superheroes, Rob would set up an altar using an ironing board, distributing candy as communion. It seemed like a child's game, but it revealed something deeper, a heart already leaning toward the divine. His parents never forced this path. They simply encouraged it, with love, with trust, and with prayer. Rob's sense of calling grew, organically, watered by the quiet example of Mildred and Louis. He eventually chose to attend St. Augustine Seminary High School in Michigan, where he thrived academically and spiritually. He led the yearbook, participated in student council, debated with grace, and was inducted into the National Honor Society. But it wasn't ambition that drove him. It was quiet purpose, a desire to serve, a calling to love. Rob went on to study mathematics at Villanova University. His mind was sharp, drawn to the logic, structure, and beauty found in numbers. But even there, his faith never dimmed. It grew deeper, more mature, more personal. By 1982, Rob faced a pivotal decision. With a degree in hand and a world of opportunity ahead, he chose the path of service. He entered the Catholic Theological Union in Chicago, earning a Master of Divinity. He then taught math and physics at St. Rita of Cassia High School, not just as science, but as reflections of God's order and creativity. His journey soon led him to Rome, where he studied canon law at the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas. There he earned a licentiate and a doctorate. His thesis explored the local role of a prior within the Augustinian tradition, a blend of theology, law, and pastoral care. It was yet another layer of his quiet preparation for something far beyond what anyone could yet imagine. All the while, Mildred and Louis remained in the background, praying, encouraging, and living their own quiet vocations. They never sought the spotlight, yet through them, Rob grew into a man capable of extraordinary leadership, humility, and grace. Today, the world knows him as Pope Leo XIV, a man of deep faith, clarity, and compassion. But his greatness didn't begin in the Vatican. It began in the unseen, uncelebrated acts of love in a modest Illinois home. It was formed through whispered prayers, shared meals, and an unwavering commitment to live faithfully, day by day, moment by moment. This is the untold story of Mildred Agnes Provost. She never stood behind a podium. She never wrote a theological treatise. But she gave the world a son who would one day lead the global church. Her life reminds us that real holiness is not about recognition, it's about consistency. It's about choosing love when no one is watching, about offering prayers when no one hears, about raising a child not for fame but for faith. As Pope Leo XIV now speaks to the world about renewal, healing, and unity, few know the source of that strength. It lies in a suburban home, in a mother's quiet faith, in a father's humble integrity. Their hidden sacrifices bore fruit that, now nourishes the Church itself. You may never hear the name Mildred Provost in headlines, but her legacy lives on in every homily her son delivers, every message of peace he shares, and every soul he touches. Her story is a reminder. The greatest acts of influence are often invisible. They bloom not in public moments, but in the quiet faithfulness of ordinary love. So let her story challenge us. Let it remind us of the sacred work happening behind closed doors, in families, in small churches, in silent prayers. Let it urge us to see greatness not in fame but in faith, and let it renew our own call to live with integrity, love, and a faith that, though unseen, may one day shape the world. Because in the end, the most extraordinary lives often begin in the most ordinary places, and holiness, true holiness, is always born from love. And so as the world looks to Pope Leo XIV with admiration, watching him speak before nations, comfort the suffering and call for a church renewed in spirit, what they rarely see is the foundation beneath his feet. They see the robes and hear the titles, but they do not see the humble stitching of a mother's prayers or the worn hands of a father who led by quiet example. And yet, that is where his strength was born. Mildred's prayers echo now through the walls of the Vatican, not because they were loud, but because they were faithful. Her whispered pleas at the bedside, her steady hope in times of doubt, and her silent trust in God's plan were not forgotten. They became the rhythm of Rob's heart. They became the well from which he would draw wisdom, mercy, and peace. And Louis, so often unnoticed, left a legacy just as enduring. He taught his son that leadership is not domination, but service. That true character is forged not in what you say when others are watching, but in what you do when no one is. He taught Rob that holiness has more to do with showing up, doing right, and loving quietly than with anything else. That was his gift, a life that didn't clamor for attention, but stood as a steady flame. Even now, as Pope Leo XIV walks the halls of St. Peter's Basilica or kneels in prayer beneath Michelangelo's dome, the imprint of his parents remains. In every act of humility, every choice to listen rather than speak, and every decision made with prayerful care, Mildred and Louis live on. The beauty of their story is that it is not unique in its beginning. It began like so many others, two people living ordinary lives in an ordinary neighborhood. But what made it sacred was their unwavering decision to root everything in faith. They didn't know they were raising a future pope. They simply knew they were raising a child in love, in hope and in God. Their story is not only his foundation, it is a beacon for us all. It reminds parents that their smallest acts of love matter, that bedtime prayers shape souls, that integrity passed on at the dinner table can ripple out into the world in ways we may never see. It reminds teachers, neighbors, grandparents, and caretakers that we are never just one thing. We are instruments in God's larger story. What Mildred and Louis built was not simply a family. It was a sanctuary. In an age where influence is often measured by likes, followers, or headlines, their lives declare a deeper truth, that the most powerful kind of influence comes through the slow, sacred work of love, of presence, of believing when others don't, of praying when nothing seems to change, and of trusting that somehow God is always at work, even in the quiet. So yes, Pope Leo XIV now sits upon the chair of St. Peter. Yes, he guides the Church through storms and seasons, wars and renewals. But before he was Pope, he was a boy named Rob. A boy who learned to listen because someone listened to him. A boy who learned to pray because someone prayed with him. A boy who learned to love because love filled his home like morning light through a kitchen window. And that is what makes this story truly holy. It reminds us that greatness is not always visible at first. It may be born in places no one thinks to look, in a backyard garden, in a parish pew, in a quiet bedroom where a mother kneels and whispers the same prayer she did the night before. It may be born in you. You don't have to be famous to leave a legacy. You don't need a pulpit to preach love. Your daily devotion, your quiet sacrifices, your unseen acts of kindness, they matter more than you know. They shape futures. They build leaders. They reach beyond your lifetime. Perhaps you, like Mildred, will never know the full impact of your faith, but heaven